Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I have a very special guest from India. Dr. Jaijit Bhattacharya is here representing the Centre of Digital Economy Policy and Research, which is a think tank based out of India. Jaijit, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Please, for our audience, just give us a little bit of a background of yourself and why you're here in Australia.
Sure. I basically specialize in government transformation using technology. And in fact, the first book on e-governance in India was written by me, along with my co-authors, and was released by the then President Abdul Kalam. My last book, the sixth book on e-governance, was the first textbook in the world on e-governance, which was released by the current Prime Minister when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. And that's basically what I do. I live in the realm of technology, policy, and government transformation. Within that, I have been involved in helping out the government in their vision for having a more conducive business environment in India, which involved taking up very systematic steps to create a framework wherein India as a country would do better in the global ranking of World Bank in terms of ease of doing business, and also for the states to start competing with themselves, which was later on termed as comparative federalism. That's pretty much what I do.
Right. Interest in Australia is looking at how we do business with India. And one of the challenges we have is to persuade Australian companies that it's much easier now than it used to be 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And, we have a lot of boards that are filled with, Australians that have had some experience with India, but not too much. They're a little bit scared. Once bitten, twice shy kind of theory. Would you mind expanding on, what's happened in India in as far as the ease of doing business is concerned,
Sure.
How that was conceived and where it is right now, and how that would benefit Australian businesses who are looking to do business with India, or at least considering?
Sure. Let me first start by setting up the base of what is India. And there have been many people having their views on it. And one of the popular ways of comparing India is to compare it with Europe, saying it's as complex as Europe is. India's got 29 states, 7 union territories, and Europe has got as many countries. But that's a wrong comparison because India is far more complex than Europe is. That's because we have 3 times the population of Europe, right? And India is not a subcontinent; it's actually a supercontinent, given the size of the people that we have. And that's where the fallacy starts coming in. An investor walks into India believing they're investing into one single country. That's not the case. The comparison also is very often done with China, because you can walk into China as long as you have done the right things, you are pretty much set. And the difference is in China, decisions are made. In India, decisions happen. And there's a significant difference between the two. In that context, what the government has tried to do is shepherd all the states into having a common set of taxation rules, a common set of business processes, and a common set of mechanisms by which they deal with the private sector and the investors. And that's where the transformation has happened. If you compare India with Europe as an example, as of now, I don't think not having a conducive environment is a excuse that one can take anymore to not invest into India. India, frankly, at this stage is as conducive as it comes. Is as conducive as US is, as Brazil is, or as China is in that sense. As my previous role of being the head of economy and policy for KPMG India, we were tracking the regulations in India. We had 7,000 pieces of regulations that we were tracking for India.
Wow.
Can you guess the number of regulations we were tracking for US? 70,000.
Really?
70,000 pieces of regulations that we were tracking in US. We understand US better, so we feel that US is less complicated. But guess what? In most cases and most disputes, US comes at the top and India doesn't. And India is a far more conducive environment. That doesn't mean that US is tough to do business with. All I'm saying is that India has become very easy to do business with. Unfortunately, what happens is that you've got small and medium enterprises landing up in India with the lure of the large market, and they want to do a quick buck, a quick deal, and they end up talking to the wrong set of people.
Right.
And since they don't have the wherewithal to do multiple trips, they quickly sign up a deal in the first 1 or 2 trips, And then they come back and realize that those were the wrong deals, and then they think that India does not work, and the message spreads.
Yes.
India is a place where you learn. You must be ready to learn. You must be patient. And you would have heard that umpteen number of times.
Absolutely.
I have to repeat it because truth doesn't change.
No, absolutely.
And that's what the truth is. You need to be patient. You need to learn. You need to go through a runway. And only then you can start flying in India. And if you try to accelerate the process, you'll end up burning your fingers.
Yes. Yes, yes. So in that regard, just walk us through what India has done at a high level to actually get to that stage.
Sure.
In the last, say 5 or 7 years.
Sure. So we were at our worst in terms of global rankings in ease of doing business in 2014, which is called the 2015 report, but it came out in 2014 of the World Bank. We were 142nd ranking in a committee of 188 nations. In terms of contract enforcement, we were 184 out of 188. That's how bad we were.
Yes.
And how can you do business with no contract being enforced? Right?
Yes.
And that was a huge challenge. So what the government did was, one, focused on the World Bank rankings, which was done in only 2 states, 2 cities, in fact, not even states. So they looked at how business was done in Mumbai and business was done in Delhi, based on which this ranking was being done. So government wanted to fix that because that's important to get the eyeballs and the attention of foreign investors. But on the second hand, in parallel, what they also did was focus on the states to make a real difference on what is ease of doing business. Because some of the parameters that the World Bank was using was not relevant for India, and there were many parameters that were relevant for India, which the World Bank was not tracking. So we brought in a separate set of 10, 11 parameters, based on which we deep dived and actually had a set of 884 atomic parameters based on those 10 larger segments. We realized that you can't judge the states on 884 parameters, so we cut it down to about 350 in the first phase. And what do I mean by atomic parameters? Those parameters are either yes or a no. There was no subjectivity in it.
Gotcha.
Either you have done it or not done it. So the states can't come back and say, well, I did it this way and that way, and you have not judged me. Even when we said that, there were nuances within it. But one of the rules that we set was that the states need to, one, publish all the rules that they have, and second, make it online.
Right.
And why am I saying that? Is because prior to when we started this exercise, which was in 2014, if you would go to any government officer and say, is there a rule to put a gate in front of my factory? Because there's nothing written there, they'll cook up a rule. They'll cook up a rule on the fly and say, that is a rule, and please go ahead and do it, and you need to give me 5 copies of 7 documents and so on and so forth.
Right.
Which is what frustrated the investors, because everybody wants to comply. Nobody wants to be non-compliant with the law of the land. But please show me the law of the land, right? And nobody knows the law of the land. Not even the officers know the law of the land, and therefore they would quickly come out with the law of the land. And they would do so that they cover themselves, because they should not be caught up by somebody saying that you had a vested interest, and so you allowed this gate to be created, and you did not take any documentation against it. So they have to give pain to the investor to show that they did not have any vested interest.
Yes.
That changed because we said you must publish all rules, and if you can't publish it, the rule doesn't exist, right? And you must publish it online.
Yes.
So from there we have evolved, and in 3 years' time, in the global rankings, we have come up by 65 ranks. We are now 77th rank. But what also happened within that, the nuances such as one state coming out and saying, well, we have everything online. You said that you should be able to apply online. We have everything online, and so the investor can come online and get their permission to set up business. So look, we had asked for a single window, an online single window process. You're saying they will come and they'll get permission to set up business, post which, what are they supposed to do? Oh, then they will go to all the 40 departments and then run around and get the permissions from them. That is not a single window clearance.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
where you will appreciate the atomicity of the ranking.
Yes.
We said if it's done, it's done. There is no 0 or 1. There is no 0.75. I've done it halfway through or not done it. So if a state said we have done it, we would check the whole way around whether they have actually, you get the permissions from all the relevant departments and you can set up your factory. The consent to establish, consent to operate, all the environmental clearances, whether you get it from one single window. And I'm so happy to see So many of the states having such wonderful systems in place. We go to only one place and everything gets done. And in the back end, they've done a whole bunch of business process reforms. In one state, they've got the representatives of all the departments sitting in one building.
Right.
Unlike in most other governments where they sit in their own departmental buildings, several kilometers apart, they all sit in one place. They take a decision every day whether they have to give an approval to an investor or not. And once you file your case, it's the government which chases you up. You don't need to chase anyone.
Right.
They will chase you up and say, have you submitted this document? If not, let me help you submit it. Right? I'll work with you, I'll sit with you, and I'll get it done.
Wow.
Which is a tremendous change that has happened in the last 3 years since we started this process. This was actually being driven by DIPP.
Okay.
And it was a DIPP initiative. In fact, it was started by Mr. Amitabh Kant when he was the secretary of DIPP, and then it was taken forward by Mr. Ramesh Abhishek, who then took over from Mr. Amitabh Kant. Yes. And subsequently, Niti Aayog has been very, very supportive of this entire process. What it led to was what is now called comparative federalism, but at that point in time, I used to call it a constitutional innovation.
Right.
And why was it a constitutional innovation? Because the central government, as per the constitution, has got no say in the affairs of the state government, has got very minimal say. They cannot dictate to the state governments that you must change this or that. And therefore, how do you make the change? Because from an investor who's coming from outside, India's India. They do not care if it's a state of Maharashtra, or a state of Andhra Pradesh or West Bengal.
That's right.
It is India. How does the central government affect this change? Which is where we created this mechanism, which was Mr. Amitabh Kant's vision of having this ranking, which led to this constitutional innovation by which the state governments kind of followed what the central government wanted it to do.
Right.
And in a very positive manner, in a very, very healthy manner. Looking back, I really call it a gamification of governance, because it was essentially following the principles of gamification. If the state governments do not participate, they do not get the rankings.
Right.
Therefore, they do not get investments, and therefore they do not get jobs.
Yes.
And if they do not get jobs, they do not get votes.
Yes.
It was part of a fair democratic process that we brought this innovation in. And as you can see, it's been brilliantly successful. It's been a terrific innovation brought in by the government.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're at a level. Where to next?
So as you would see in this year, most of the states have crossed, 90% of states have got over 90% marks in each of these areas. When we started off, hardly 75% of states got more than 50% marks in anything. On year one, as I said, we had 884 parameters. And we started off by a lesser set of parameters. So one, we are increasing the number of parameters by which the states are being judged year after year. And second, we are making the parameters more and more stringent. To give you an example, why can't I predict that you as an investor is going to need 6 months down the line and give it to you a priori? If I see your production going up, why don't I give you extra electricity load before you ask for it? Why should you wait for an application to be sent to me? I should be able to give it to you straight away.
That's right.
That saves your cost. If your cost is saved, the total cost of the economy gets saved, and both of us gain. Both you and the government gains. Those are the kinds of vision that we believe we should be moving to, and that's the answer to your question as to what next.
Yeah.
We would like to make it a predictive governance. We would like to predict what you need and give it to you before you need it.
Wow.
That's one dimension. The second dimension that we are very keen to look at is plug and play. We know that there are areas where India could be globally competitive. We would like investors to simply come in, plunk the money, set up the infrastructure, and go to market. They should not bother about land acquisition. They should not bother about even taking a loan from the bank. We'll arrange for the financing. As long as there is a credible entity which wants to set up investment in India, in an area where India could be globally competitive, we would like to provide you a plug and play environment. So those are the kind of areas that India would like to get into.
Wonderful. Your views and thoughts on the Australia-India relationship, and particularly the trade and investment, where do you think it is now, and where do you think it will be in the future?
So, the trade and relationship on the ground is basically focused on copper,
yes,
and coal, and chickpea. Right, the 3 C's. But there is more life and more possibility beyond the 3 C's. I was giving an example of mangoes as an example.
Yes.
The point is, and why I was taking mangoes is because that's the national fruit of India. Do we get mangoes in winters? We don't get mangoes in winters. But guess what? When we've got winters in India, you got summers in Australia.
Yes.
Right? You could easily grow mangoes and send it over to India, to 1.3 billion people who love mangoes. Right?
Yeah.
And that's just an example of the possibilities. The innovations that are possible between India and Australia are humongous. Most of the conversation that I hear is what can India serve to Australia and what can Australia serve to India. We don't get into conversations where what can India and Australia together serve to the rest of the world, right? If I look at, let's say, the education sector as an example. Now, I do agree it's tough to set up an education sector in India. It's very tough to set up a university, whereas that's what the competitive advantage of Australia is. And if you can't set it up in India because of reservations issue and local regulatory issues, which even the government will find it difficult to change, set it up in Nepal.
Sure.
And then you got access to a population of 3 billion people from China and from India who can freely come, and we can jointly set up these universities, and you will have the best of universities, best of students who will pay a much lower amount to get education than flying down to Australia or flying down to US or UK.
Sure.
So there are a whole bunch of such innovations we can do. The other segment that is getting missed out is defense. There is a lot of places that we can cooperate. One of the places that is almost a no-brainer is just the testing of various equipment. Now, India is a very, very densely populated country. We can't test. You can't blow a mine under a bulletproof jeep to see whether it's mine-proof or not,
Right.
because where do you do it?
Right.
And the licenses required to do it is very, very complex for the right reasons, because you can't endanger people's life. In Australia, you've got huge amount of space. You can actually test missiles, you can drop bombs, you can drop light bombs, you can do anything. And guess what? You have got companies like Nuvos who have got an array of aircrafts which will put many of the global air forces to shame. What they have in terms of the number of aircrafts and the variety of aircrafts, the sheer firepower that they have in order to test is far superior to many of the air forces in the world. So defense clearly is one place that we can cooperate in. Agriculture is much talked about, but the dimension was talking about the complementarity between education in agriculture is another area. Education, again, not just serving India, but together serving the rest of the world is another area we can look at, because we can manufacture professors far, far faster than what Australia can.
Yes, faculty is very important.
Faculty is extremely important, and therefore we can do that together. And I purposefully use the word manufacture because we can actually start training AI systems and ed tech, education tech. Together we can build these technologies which can then rapidly train people globally.
Yes.
And therefore that's the context where I was using the word manufacture.
Right.
So we manufacture artificial intelligence which can then go and teach people, because in today's world you need rapidly evolving education. It'll be very difficult for just human faculty to cope up and be able to teach. And therefore we need to start moving into the other mechanisms of teaching. Absolutely. And that's where this becomes a very, very vibrant cooperation. And I can go on in various aspects, infrastructure, waterways, every aspect of water, sewage water treatment, rainwater treatment, black water treatment, water transportation.
Right.
Inland water transportation, international water transportation.
Wow. We
just cleared 110 water routes. In India, the water ports, the river ports were destroyed when the British wanted to put up the railway systems, because they did not want to have competition railways. So the river ports were destroyed. The river is the cheapest and most environmentally friendly modes of communication, and we are blessed with a whole bunch of rivers. And thanks to our cooperation with Bangladesh, who have been very, very gracious, we can now transport from Kolkata to Guwahati via Bangladesh, thanks to the support that we've got from Bangladesh. And I'm sure it's a win-win proposition.
Yeah.
And those are possibilities that are mind-boggling. We can do coastal shipping. We can have ships going and hugging the coast. You don't need the big vessels. You don't need big ports. You don't need a big draft. So you can set up very, very cheap ports to have coastal shipping going right up to Thailand and Malaysia and so on and so forth, at a much lower cost than the regular shipping is. And those are areas where Australia clearly has expertise, and one can share those expertise and grow. From an Australian perspective, given the fact that greenfield is still complex in India, just like it is in anywhere else, it'll be worthwhile to start investing in brownfield, in asset recycling, TOTs, and those are excellent mechanisms and structures that have been created by the government. And those are places where I would recommend Australians to start looking at first, rather than jumping head-on into greenfield projects.
Understand, yeah. I think hearing you talk is very exciting for me personally, because I'm very passionate about the Australia-India relationship. I think there's an opportunity here to start a very, very niche, specific think tank to, mull over these ideas and many others by bringing together some very good, smart people like yourselves into this group. And maybe that's food for thought. But on that note, I really appreciate you talking to us, Dr. Bhattacharya. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks for having
it.
me here.
Pleasure.